For decades, Pastor Robert Morris marketed himself like heaven's top executive. He wasn't just preaching faith, he was selling a brand, complete with polished sermons, luxury aesthetics, and corporate-style ambition. From the pulpit, he convinced believers that sacrificial giving was a spiritual investment with eternal returns, while those same donations quietly funded a lifestyle dripping in excess. Designer suits stayed crisp, private travel stayed premium, and multiple mansions stayed spotless, all under the banner of serving God. That's because the blueprint for megachurch fame rarely changes. Play humble on stage, but never stop reminding people how God carried you through every struggle. Shower the congregation with love so they'll keep giving, then remind them that holding back could bring divine consequences. It's a carefully balanced mix of charm, pressure, and fear, and it works. Behind closed doors, the real work begins. Any trace of wrongdoing gets buried, questions get silenced, and loyalty, especially from family, becomes non-negotiable. Greed, ego, and control sit at the center of it all. Robert Morris fit this pattern perfectly, and later revelations would show he was far from an exception. Years later, a woman would come forward and accuse Morris of serious misconduct that occurred when she was a child. By the time she was an adult with a family of her own, she could no longer stay silent. While Morris continued to rise in fame and wealth, untouched by the past she was still forced to live with. When she finally spoke up, everything unraveled fast. The empire Morris and his inner circle built began to collapse in full public view. This is the shocking rise and brutal fall of Pastor Robert Morris and Gateway Church. Robert Preston Morris was born on July 29, 1961, in Marshall, Texas, the youngest child in a deeply religious Baptist family. Church wasn't optional, it was constant. 3 times a week, every week. Faith shaped the household, but as Robert grew older, he didn't openly claim a calling to ministry. Still, he learned how to look the part better than anyone. That image became his shield. By his own later admissions, Robert was already living a double life as a teenager. Years after that, he would openly confess that he sold drugs out of his car, sometimes even in church parking lots before and after services. Then he'd walk inside, lift his hands, praise God, and say exactly what people wanted to hear. Nobody questioned him. The clean-cut image worked. This habit of deception, one face for the public, another behind the scenes, would follow him everywhere. After high school, Robert enrolled at East Texas Baptist College, later attending the Criswell Center for Biblical Studies in Dallas, now known as Criswell College. On paper, he looked like a future pastor in the making. On May 2nd, 1980, at just 18 years old, Robert married a young woman named Debbie. Years later, he would claim God told him to marry her. That story only strengthened his image. Young, devoted, married, and called by God. Trust came easy and questions disappeared even faster. The drugs were gone, but the double life stayed. Robert simply swapped one form of wrongdoing for another. This time, it was calculated and hidden behind scripture. By the time he married Debbie, he was already working as a traveling evangelist for the Highway 80 Rescue Mission in Longview, Texas. While traveling, Robert often stayed in the homes of church families, a common practice built entirely on trust. Pastors were seen as safe, honorable guests. Less than a year into his marriage, Robert stayed with a family in Hominy, Oklahoma, who were deeply involved in their church community. Their daughter, Cindy, was 11 years old when she first met Robert. He was 20, energetic, charismatic, and already gaining attention in evangelical circles. Her parents trusted him enough to ask him to lead a youth revival at their church, and from that point on, he became a regular presence in their lives. Around the same time, Robert and Debbie welcomed their first son, Josh. Sometimes Robert traveled with his family, other times alone, but whenever he came through town, he stayed with Cindy's family. The bond between the families grew so close that they even vacationed together, blending ministry trips with leisure. By Christmas of 1982, that closeness had fully settled in. Cindy's parents invited Robert to spend the holidays with them while he was traveling. Meanwhile, his public profile was exploding. In an April 1982 newspaper interview, Robert claimed he had traveled over 100,000 miles, spoken to 500,000 people, and seen more than 10,000 conversions in just 2 years. He was also invited to join the James Robison Evangelistic Association, one of the biggest evangelical platforms in the country at the time. Led by televangelist James Robison, the organization hosted massive revival events and nationally broadcast programs with huge audiences. Joining that group was a major power move. It put Robert on a national stage and opened doors to major churches, conferences, and crusades far beyond his small traveling ministry. This was the inner circle, the fast track to becoming a big name. Robert leaned hard into his testimony. He openly talked about his past, saying his old lifestyle was just him searching for happiness. He even admitted he didn't convert to Christianity until February 1981, long after he'd already been preaching. That dramatic turnaround pulled people in fast. Crowd said he spoke with wisdom beyond his age. But while people listened, admired, and trusted him, Robert was perfecting the one skill that mattered most, living two completely separate lives. When Robert stayed with Cindy's family during Christmas of 1982, she was 12 years old on Christmas Eve. Cindy sat quietly in the backseat of the car while her parents drove everyone to church. Robert was next to her, calm and familiar, someone her family trusted completely. That's when he leaned in and whispered that she should come see him later after it got dark. She didn't question it. She was a child, and he was a respected family friend. That night, after the house went quiet, Cindy walked down the hallway toward Robert's room. Years later, she would still remember exactly what she was wearing. Pink pajamas, bloomer-style pants, underwear underneath, and a snap-up robe. That memory never faded. When she entered the room, Robert told her to lie down, close her eyes, and stay still. What followed was abuse. Afterward, he warned her, saying, "Never tell anyone about this because it will ruin everything." That sentence became a weapon he used for years. For the next 4.5 years, Robert continued abusing Cindy whenever he found the opportunity. The families grew even closer on the outside. Cindy's parents regularly traveled to Texas to visit Robert and Debbie. They stayed in their home, shared meals, attended church together, and lived what looked like a picture-perfect Christian life. Cindy's parents believed these trips were about faith, fellowship, and ministry. Jerry even donated money to support Robert's work. But behind the scenes, Robert's focus was control, keeping Cindy isolated, silent, and afraid to speak up. By day, Robert kept playing the role of devoted pastor, husband, and father. He preached, prayed, and smiled for crowds. But whenever he could, he created excuses to be alone with Cindy. As she entered her teenage years, his behavior escalated. He would show up unannounced, offer rides, and find moments where no one else was around. Eventually, Robert stopped traveling as an evangelist and moved near Fort Worth, Texas, to become a pastor at Shady Grove Church, a name that felt painfully ironic. While Cindy carried years of shame and emotional damage, Robert showed no signs of guilt. His public life only improved. Robert and Debbie became deeply involved in church leadership. They volunteered, served, and positioned themselves wherever influence was growing. Robert's speaking skills and Debbie's warm personality made them popular in ministry circles. People saw them as genuine, caring, and trustworthy. But it was all a front. In 1987, everything finally cracked. Cindy was 17 years old when a conversation with a friend changed everything. While discussing an unrelated situation the friend had gone through, the friend gently asked her, "Has anyone ever done this to you?" Cindy hesitated. She said she wasn't allowed to talk about it because she had promised never to tell. But with her friend's support, the truth finally came out. She named the person who had abused her, someone who, by then, had harmed her more than 100 times. The two girls immediately went to Jerry and Susan. Cindy told them what Robert had been doing since she was 12 years old. Her parents believed her without hesitation. But what happened next would change everything. Instead of going directly to law enforcement, Jerry called the head pastor at Shady Grove Church. He demanded Robert's immediate resignation and warned that he would report the abuse if action wasn't taken. According to reports, the church allowed Robert to step away from ministry, but only temporarily. There was no public investigation, no accountability process, no protection plan. Robert was not fired. Soon after Cindy spoke up, she received a phone call from Debbie. Debbie told her that she forgave her. She didn't explain why, but the message was clear. Robert had blamed Cindy, a child, for what happened. That call left lasting damage. Within days, the relationship between the two families completely collapsed. No more holidays together, no more visits, no more shared faith. Cindy was left alone to rebuild her life while Robert and Debbie quietly moved on. For the next 2 years, Robert worked outside of ministry as a security guard and used car salesman. But just like clockwork, exactly 2 years after that phone call to the church pastor, Robert was back in church leadership. He still had James Robinson's backing. He was appointed associate pastor and slowly rebuilt his influence. Throughout the 1990s, he preached, traveled, and positioned himself for something bigger. By April of 2000, Robert no longer wanted to share power. On Easter weekend, he and Debbie launched the very first service of Gateway Church. the beginning of a massive empire built on a foundation the public still knew nothing about. The first Gateway Church services were held in a rented space in Grapevine, Texas, but this was never some small, struggling startup. More than 180 people packed into that very first gathering, and the crowd only got bigger every single week. Within a year, Robert and Debbie had already locked down a permanent building for their rapidly growing flock. By 2003, attendance exploded into the thousands. Gateway officially crossed the line into megachurch territory, pulling in more than 2,000 people every week. Robert's influence was skyrocketing, his platform expanding, and his reputation glowing in public. In November 2010, Gateway Church unveiled a jaw-dropping $60 million 64-acre campus in Southlake, Texas. The property featured a massive 4,000-seat auditorium, which only represented about 25% of Gateway's 16,000 weekly attendees. The scale was unreal. More than a decade had passed since Cindy's allegations first surfaced. While Robert was thriving, expanding, and celebrated, Cindy was barely holding herself together. She spent years in counseling, trying to process the harm done to her, not just by a family friend, but by someone she was taught to trust as a pastor. In a 2024 interview, Cindy explained that it wasn't until she was 35 years old that something finally clicked. She had been watching an episode of Oprah, and for the first time, she heard her experience described as grooming. And she said, "I couldn't understand why Oprah called it abuse. I said, he's not being mean. He wasn't aggressive. He was very playful or, seductive. I guess that's the word Oprah used." That moment changed everything. Cindy realized that harm doesn't always look violent. Often it's quiet, calculated, and built on manipulation, power, and misplaced trust. Up until that point, Cindy had no contact with Robert. But after that realization in 2005, she hired an attorney and filed a civil lawsuit against him. In the filing, she stated she was still suffering severe emotional distress and ongoing mental anguish as a direct result of Robert's actions. Robert's legal team responded aggressively. They argued that Cindy had brought the situation on herself, claiming, "It was your client who initiated inappropriate behavior by coming into my client's bedroom and getting in bed with him." They also accused her of chasing money, suggesting she wanted $2 million to profit from Robert's success. That claim was false. Cindy had actually asked for $50,000, strictly to cover years of counseling and mental health care. Robert's lawyers countered with $25,000, but only if she signed a non-disclosure agreement. Cindy refused. While all of this was unfolding behind the scenes, Robert continued living his best life in public. From the stage, he preached the prosperity gospel, urging followers to give 10% of everything they earned, even when they were struggling to pay bills. He repeatedly told his congregation that he didn't need their money, but warned they might miss God's blessings if they didn't give. He even suggested they'd be opening the door to Satan if they held back. According to Robert, he was just the guy collecting on God's behalf.
Be carefully, because I'm going to say something very strong. Any person that doesn't tithe is arrogant. Because you believe you can make it your way and not doing it God's way. And you have to be arrogant to steal from God. And you have to be arrogant to steal from God. You have to be extremely arrogant to steal from God. And please understand, if you don't tithe, that's an open door to demons. Because that's exactly what the enemy does. He's a thief. And you're allowing God. You're allowing Satan to get you to be a thief, but not only a thief, but stealing from God. And I don't say that to make you feel condemned or to argue about tithing. I'm telling you, that's an open door, and no matter how many doors you close in your life, if you're not a tither, you've always got an open door to the enemy.
Meanwhile, the Morris family enjoyed a lifestyle most church members could only dream of. Robert and Debbie lived in multi-million-dollar homes while many of their followers struggled just to afford rent. And at one point, the couple owned 3 mansions at the same time. One was a 370-acre ranch in Jacksboro, Texas, valued at $8 million. The property featured 5 lakes, multiple docks, and a fence that alone reportedly cost $1 million. The estate included a main home, a barn, and an in-ground pool. They also owned a custom-built $8 million mansion in Colleyville, plus a $1.7 million vacation home on Possum Kingdom Lake, complete with a private dock and dense wooded land for privacy. Another property, a nearly $4 million home in Westlake, sat in one of the wealthiest communities in the entire country. Robert wasn't just making money from the pulpit. He built a publishing empire, releasing best-selling religious books that promise blessings, purpose, and spiritual clarity. His most famous title, The Blessed Life, taught that generosity and tithing were the keys to living under God's favor. Other books like From Dream to Destiny and The God I Never Knew focused on purpose, faith, and personal connection to the Holy Spirit. These books also helped Robert rewrite his own story. In From Dream to Destiny, Robert claimed he stepped down from ministry at age 25 to deal with personal pride. He wrote that God told him, "You could step out of ministry and just take a regular job." But those closest to the truth knew better. Robert hadn't stepped down by choice. He was forced out after Jerry contacted church leadership over what had happened to his daughter. The book version was clean. The real story was not. Robert didn't stop there. In 2009, he expanded his income again by launching a university under Gateway's umbrella. Instead of building from scratch, he partnered with the King's University, a seminary founded by Jack Hayford. The South Lake campus operated as a satellite location, offering degrees in theology, ministry, and Christian leadership. Most of the staff came from Gateway Church itself, and many of the students were pulled straight from Robert's congregation. Tuition ranged from roughly $2,500 to $4,000 per year, depending on housing. By 2014, the South Lake location became the university's main campus and administrative hub, driving enrollment and money way up. The title of University Chancellor was added to Robert's growing resume, but his biggest reach came through television. His program, Worship in the Word with Robert Morris, aired across broadcast networks, reaching audiences in nearly 7,000 cities. The brand was booming. The truth, however, was still buried. While exact viewership numbers were never publicly released, estimates suggested Robert's weekly audience rivaled heavyweights like Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, and Joyce Meyer.
How important is it for us to have a grateful heart in what we have and not get caught up in this comparison game of what, well, they have this, they must be more blessed than me. You know, all of these little lies that get stuck in our head about what God has for us individually.
Especially with social media. Comparisons.
And it's even one of God's top 10. Is that you're not supposed to covet what your neighbor has. And what that does is our neighbor's got a new house, we need a new house. They got a new car, we need a new car. And it causes you not to be content with what God has given you. And here, think about this. When you buy something that you don't have the money for, you are literally saying to God, I am not content with your provision for me, and I'm going to do it on my own. And I think God, in his love, says, okay, great, do it on your own. Just go ahead. Now, he's not doing that to hurt us or even punish us, because Jesus took our punishment, but he wants us to come to the place to say, you know what, I don't want to do it on my own anymore. I'd like to do it your way. And then he can line things up. He's a God of order. He's not a God of confusion. The whole universe, when Satan fell to the earth, it became a place of confusion. God comes in and immediately puts things in order. And when he puts things in order and we put things in order, then the blessing can come.
That's right.
You know, one of the things you say in your book is you'll never fulfill the destiny that God has for you if you don't get your finances in order. That's a pretty big statement right there, because we just think, we know people in ministry that just, God's called me, and then they just, but they take no thought of how they're going to do it or the finances that are considered.
And Jesus, again, he said, you know, who would start to build something without counting the cost? That's Jesus himself saying that. And then you've got 16.
And even use the analogy of a tower, because, you know, we're in TV. So count the cost before you build the tower.
Before the tower, that's it. Now, I'll bet Marcus might have seen that.
Totally.
But 16 out of 38 parables have to do with money and possessions. This is Jesus. So almost half of his sermons, think about if you went to a church, and almost half the pastor's sermons, he talked about money and possessions. You wouldn't want to go to Jesus' church. But why would he do that? It's because he knows that that is such a stronghold that once we can get that area under control, we can get the rest of the areas under control. And it's so many times we even talk about stewarding our time, our energy, our physical bodies, all those things, and those need to be stewarded. But I've seen those just fall into order when people get their finances in order, because where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Not is, it will be. It'll follow it. So it's so important to get our treasure in line, because then it does the work in our hearts.
That kind of exposure came with massive influence, and Robert knew exactly how to use it. In 2016, he reached what many would call the peak of his career. During Donald Trump's first presidential campaign, Robert was appointed to the Evangelical Executive Advisory Board. The role placed him among an elite group of powerful pastors tasked with advising Trump and mobilizing evangelical voters. That influence was on full display again in June 2020, when Trump visited Gateway Church's Dallas campus for an event titled The Roundtable on Transition to Greatness. Trump publicly thanked Robert and praised the church's hospitality, sealing a mutually beneficial relationship. And Trump gained credibility with conservative Christians. Robert gained national political relevance. At the same time, Robert was strengthening media power plays behind the scenes. He built deep ties with the Daystar television network, a name already known for controversy. Gateway regularly partnered with Daystar to broadcast conferences and large-scale church events, pushing Robert's reach far beyond Texas. Through Daystar's platform, Gateway content landed in millions of homes worldwide. Robert also connected with other major figures in charismatic and prosperity-focused church circles, further cementing his status. By the early 2000s, Gateway wasn't just a church, it was a full-blown operation. The organization expanded to 9 campuses, 8 across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and 1 in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This allowed Gateway to host more than 30,000 worshipers weekly across 29 weekend services. By 2023, weekly attendance hovered around 26,000 people, making Gateway the 9th largest church in the United States. Behind the scenes, the church employed roughly 750 full-time staff to run campuses, the college, and a worship ministry producing Christian music albums. In November 2024, Gateway elders told the congregation that 19% of church revenue went to global missions, roughly $19 million based on annual income near $100 million. But a former Gateway pastor challenged that claim. According to him, during his time on staff, mission spending never exceeded $3 million per year. He said that one day he noticed $1.5 million had been transferred out of the Global Missions Fund. When he asked Robert where the money went, he was told to resign. Gateway has never publicly disclosed how much Robert was paid as senior pastor. While book sales brought in income, they don't explain the massive wealth he accumulated at his peak. In addition to his Gateway salary and benefits, Robert earned between $200,000 and $350,000 annually through the Robert Morris Evangelistic Association, an organization he created early in his career. Tax filings showed he worked about 15 hours a week, translating to as much as $269 per hour. Everything was lining up: money, power, politics, and influence. Then came June 14, 2024. That was the day the Wartburg Watch published an interview with Cindy, where she publicly detailed the abuse she endured as a child for the first time. The carefully polished image Robert had spent decades building began to crack. Fast! Robert immediately went into defense mode. He minimized his actions, shifted blame, and framed what happened as a moral failure instead of acknowledging the long-term exploitation of trust and authority. He released a statement saying, "When I was in my early 20s, I was involved in an inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but it was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years." What he didn't say mattered just as much as what he did. He didn't mention that she was 12 years old. He didn't say it happened over 100 times. He didn't say it only stopped because she spoke up, not because he chose to stop. He also left out that he was married, preaching abstinence and morality and using his position as a trusted guest in the family's home to gain access. Less than a week after Cindy's story went public, Gateway Church elders announced they had accepted Robert's resignation. They also said they would conduct a review to, quote, have a complete understanding of the events. Their statement continued, "Robert has been forthright about a moral failure he had over 35 years ago. He has shared publicly from the pulpit the proper biblical steps he took in this lengthy restoration process. Since the resolution of the 35-year-old matter, there have been no other moral failures." They added that Robert had walked in purity, had accountability systems in place, and that the issue had been properly disclosed to leadership. But those claims didn't line up with Robert's own words. In a 2014 sermon, Robert admitted he was very sexually immoral as a teenager. Instead of taking responsibility, he blamed a curse and claimed it made lying and manipulation easy. He said, "I learned to lie and manipulate. I look for the girls that would be the most susceptible." This wasn't new behavior. Robert frequently framed harmful actions as spiritual attacks rather than personal responsibility. He preached heavily about demonic influence and even claimed Gateway Church had an on-site deliverance team. a group ready to perform demon removal sessions for anyone believed to be possessed. He also issued disturbing warnings to women in his congregation. He said, "The very thing that the world tells you to give to a man before marriage to keep him will be the very thing that will cause you to lose him." He openly admitted targeting women who were insecure or lacked strong parental support. Again, shifting blame away from himself, the cracks were no longer hidden. The story Robert told for decades was falling apart, piece by piece. Robert didn't just admit targeting vulnerable people, he justified it. In his own words, he said he chose to prey on women who were insecure. He went even further, claiming that girls were made to be held by men, and if that role wasn't being filled by a father, he felt entitled to step in himself. That statement alone revealed a deeply disturbing belief system rooted in control, not faith. He then twisted scripture to defend this mindset. Robert referenced a biblical story involving violence against a woman, claiming the man despised her afterward because she was now impure. He suggested that if she had participated willingly, she would have been respected instead. This framing wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. Robert went on to declare that all premarital relationships required lying, manipulation, and deception. He even admitted to having multiple affairs during his marriage, describing them as struggles he and Debbie had to work through. Referring to abuse involving a 12-year-old as an affair showed just how deeply he minimized his actions. That language didn't match the claim that he had no other moral failures. It didn't match reality. What's even more troubling is that no one knows whether Cindy was his only victim. This warped, self-righteous attitude, combined with constant blame shifting and statements suggesting women existed for men's pleasure, finally pushed Cindy to speak publicly in 2024. By then, she had carried the trauma for decades. She believed the church's handling of the situation in the 1980s had effectively silenced her. Watching Robert continue to gain power, publish books, host conferences, and advise politicians without ever fully acknowledging the harm became unbearable. Cindy said she wanted to correct the record. She refused to let the abuse be brushed off as a moral failure with a young lady, when the reality was repeated abuse of a child. That truth mattered. When Gateway's Board of Elders announced Robert's resignation, they also revealed that 4 board members had been placed on temporary leave. One of them was Robert's own son, James. Within weeks, James and his wife publicly announced plans to launch their own church, asking supporters to help fund it. Cindy responded directly, saying she was relieved Robert was no longer leading Gateway, but deeply disappointed he had been allowed to resign. She stated clearly that he should have been terminated, not quietly released. Because Robert was allowed to resign, he argued that he was entitled to a massive retirement package. He claimed the agreement guaranteed him $800,000 per year until age 70 and $600,000 per year for life after that. Gateway pushed back hard. The church stated their official retirement policy capped benefits at $170,000 per year and included a misconduct clause. That clause allowed benefits to be reduced or eliminated entirely if a pastor's actions caused reputational or financial harm. Robert didn't back down. He filed a legal claim demanding the larger payout, insisting that his agreement with church leadership was binding. He also pushed for religious arbitration, a private process that would keep details out of public court records. Gateway's attorneys argued the dispute belonged in civil court. While that legal fight was unfolding, another bombshell dropped. Less than a month after Cindy came forward, CBS News reported that Gateway Church had quietly settled 2 separate abuse-related lawsuits in the months prior. One involved children, and the other involved an employee. Neither case involved Robert, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. The problem wasn't just one man, it was the culture. In August 2024, Gateway's Houston campus, led by Robert's son-in-law, announced it was changing its name to Newland Church. He claimed, "God is calling us into something new." The timing raised eyebrows. By November 2024, Gateway released an internal memo stating tithes had dropped 35 to 40%. The memo warned staff reductions were coming as leadership reassessed the ministry's future. As Cindy's story gained traction, prominent megachurch leaders who once praised Robert suddenly distanced themselves. Many claimed they had no knowledge of the abuse, but investigations later showed that several of them had known for over 18 years. One of those leaders was Brady Boyd, a former senior pastor at Gateway and a close associate of Robert. Brady later became head pastor at New Life Church in Colorado Springs, ironically after their previous pastor, Ted Haggard, was removed for a major scandal. Here's where it gets worse. After Haggard's dismissal in 2006, New Life began searching for a new pastor. Brady Boyd emerged as the top candidate. Karen, Cindy's sister, was a member of New Life at the time. When she learned Brady might be selected, she warned the church board. Karen told them everything. She explained that Cindy had been 12 years old, that the abuse continued for years, and that Brady knew about it. She begged them not to repeat history. The board ignored her. Not only did they appoint Brady Boyd as head pastor, they later made Robert Morris an overseer of New Life Church. Court documents released in 2025 revealed just how many senior leaders knew the truth and chose silence. One of the board members involved was Jimmy Evans, a figure connected to Daystar. Even Robert's longtime mentor, James Robinson, was later caught contradicting himself after initially claiming he knew nothing. They all treated the abuse as a closed chapter, something Robert had handled long ago. Church leaders accepted the narrative that Robert had spent decades repenting and had been fully restored. They said his ministry success proved it. But documents showed that Gateway elders admitted Robert abused a child and still declared him restored. An anonymous email sent to church leadership in 2011 even warned that a media outlet was preparing to expose the abuse. They knew. They chose silence. And that silence protected power, not people. According to the Roy's report, the warning email wasn't sent quietly or in isolation. It was addressed directly to Robert, Brady Boyd, multiple pastors at New Life Church, all Gateway elders, and others in leadership. The subject line was unmistakable. News release: Pastor Robert Morris of Gateway Church in Dallas abused a 12-year-old girl. The email included Cindy's name, her parents' names, and accurate details of what had happened to her. Instead of investigating, Gateway responded by threatening legal action, calling the information false and misleading. The priority wasn't truth, it was protection. Another document revealed something even more disturbing. It contained a pre-written statement Robert could release if the story ever became public. His PR team was already preparing damage control. In that draft, Robert minimized the abuse by pointing out that Cindy was 2 weeks from her 13th birthday, as if that detail somehow changed the severity of what he did. Even worse, the statement suggested Cindy had gotten into bed with him, subtly painting her as responsible. The same old tactic: blame the child. When the story finally broke, the very leaders who had helped keep it quiet suddenly acted shocked. Jimmy Evans released a statement saying he was devastated by Cindy's revelations. Brady Boyd stood in front of his congregation pretending this was the first time he had ever heard of it. He even praised Cindy for coming forward, despite knowing for years. Video footage showed Brady addressing his church just 7 days after Cindy's story went public and 5 days after Robert resigned.
You know, I've been your pastor now almost 17 years, and I'm grateful for that. I was thinking about how honored I am, how thankful I am for the longevity of being here with you. And with that comes relationships and trust, and I hope that's reciprocal. I love you, I trust you, I hope that's likewise. This week's been a hard week for me on a personal level because of what's happening at the church that I once was a pastor at Gateway Church in Dallas-Fort Worth. And I want you to just kind of keep in prayers this week. First of all, pray for the very courageous woman, Cindy, who came forward with new information and that led to the resignation of the pastor there. I know that pray for her. We want her to continue to heal and be made whole because of what happened, but also pray for a church that's really, being gutted right now.
At the time, many believed him, but that image didn't last. Court documents released in 2025 proved Brady and others had known about the abuse since at least 2007. When confronted later, Brady tried to backpedal. In a June 2025 statement, he spent several minutes talking about his personal hardships, his wife's medical emergency, and another family surgery before addressing Cindy's case. It was a clear attempt to gain sympathy before dodging responsibility. Even then, he continued to claim he didn't know the details. That lie didn't hold. Despite applause from his congregation, it wasn't enough to save him. The New Life Church board asked Brady Boyd to resign, and he did. For a while, many believed Robert would never face criminal charges. The abuse happened decades earlier, and people assumed the statute of limitations had expired. But then came March 12, 2025. An Oklahoma grand jury indicted Robert Morris on 5 felony counts of lewd or indecent acts involving a child. Prosecutors stated the statute of limitations didn't apply because Morris had not been a resident of Oklahoma at the time. Each charge carried a possible 20-year sentence. 5 days later, on March 17th, Robert surrendered to authorities in Osage County, posted a $50,000 bond, and walked free within minutes. Cindy responded with a statement saying, "After almost 43 years, the law has finally caught up with Robert Morris for the horrific crimes he committed against me as a child. Now it's time for the legal system to hold him accountable."
And then on Friday, an article came out, this investigative journalist, and I want to share this with you today. An article came out on Friday and made some really ugly accusations about me that kind of went national. And as your pastor, I want you to know something about me. When I stand here in front of you every Sunday, everything I tell you is the truth. I will never, ever tell something that's slanted or untrue. I'll never be manipulative toward you. I'll never tell you a half-truth. 18 years ago, I was on staff at a church in Dallas-Fort Worth called Gateway Church. And the senior pastor there was Robert Morris. Robert and I met when I was the senior pastor of a little church out in Hereford, Texas. We had about 75 people in my little church, and for whatever reason, Robert agreed to come out and speak at my little church in West Texas, and I met him for the first time there at a K-Bob's restaurant, and over a chicken fried steak, he asked me to come with him to Southlake, Texas, and help him plant the church in Southlake, and Pam and I prayed about it for a year. And finally, the Lord spoke to us that we were to go to Southlake, and so I showed up at Southlake and helped plant Gateway Church in the first year of its existence. When I came to Gateway, it was 100 people. 6.5 years later, it was about 15,000. It grew really fast, and unbelievable, miraculous growth. I was a part of all that. And during that time, Robert and I were great friends. He hired me. I worked alongside him, had no reason to believe that he had any kind of character issues. He did confide in me that he had had a moral failure when he was 20 years old. And that's really all the details that he shared. It was like 15 years before they had gone through a restoration process. And I didn't have any reason to doubt that. I never saw anything in his life that would lead me to believe that he was not a man of character. Or I would not have worked for him. I would not have put my family under his spiritual guidance if I had not known he was a man of character. Well, it came to light a year ago. In fact, next Sunday will be the 1-year anniversary of this news. But a year ago, next week, it came to light that Robert Morris had sexually assaulted a 12-year-old girl for 4 straight years. And it was shocking. It was mind-numbing. It was awful. It was evil. And he admitted to a 4-year relationship that started when he was 20 years old. The girl, Cindy Clemenshire, was 12 years old when the abuse started. And it happened for 4 years until he was 24 and she was 16. I didn't know that. Nobody, very few people knew that. The problem is that when I was interviewed here 18 years ago, there was a amazing group of people. I think 5 men, 4 women, a 9-person search committee that did a worldwide search for the next senior pastor of New Life Church. And they were amazing people, great people. They did due diligence on me. Some of the questions they asked me, I've never been asked before, but you can understand they needed to make sure that if they were going to put another person in a position of leadership at New Life, that person needed to be vetted well. And so they asked me every question they could about every topic. And I answered every question honestly. I introduced them to my friends, my pastoral friends, one of which, of course, was Robert Morris. And they prayed, they heard the Lord, and that's why I became senior pastor of New Life Church. In the process, though, of them interviewing me, the search committee was brought, the fact that Cindy Clemenshire was 12 years old, that was brought to their attention. They found out, they heard in an interview with a family member that Cindy was 12 years old. And they immediately called the elders at Gateway Church and told them. And the elders of Gateway Church said, we're aware of that. It's been handled. Her family, her pastor has given Robert a thumbs up. They've gone through a process of restoration, and there's nothing left to do. It's already been reported. But the search committee didn't tell me. And so I made Robert an overseer of the church. And I want to say something to you this morning. Knowing what I know now, I absolutely regret that. And I'm sorry that I ever gave confidence to a person that had an obvious evil thing happening in his life. That I just want to tell you, I'm so sorry that first of all, I did not know, but I would never, ever put a known pedophile in a place of authority in this church. Never would I ever do that to you, ever.
Then on October 2nd, 2025, Robert Morris took a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 5 felony counts. He received a 10-year sentence but would serve only 6 months in jail, followed by release as a registered offender and $250,000 in restitution. Cindy sat in the courtroom surrounded by her family. She had waited decades for that moment. During her victim impact statement, she faced Robert directly and explained how the abuse affected every part of her life, her relationships, her marriages, and the way she raised her children. She told him she prayed he would finally understand the depth of the pain he caused. She said, "Let me be clear. There is no such thing as consent from a 12-year-old child. We were never in an inappropriate relationship. I was not a young lady. I was a child. You committed a crime against me." Robert never looked at her, not once. Her 82-year-old father cried silently as she spoke. Her sister Karen also addressed the court, describing how the abuse shattered their entire family. She looked at Robert and said, "You pretended to be holy, preaching from big pulpits. While you hid behind your facade, we knew you were a predator." As Robert was led away in handcuffs, he turned to his wife and children and said, "Love y'all." Later, Brady Boyd quietly started a new church in Colorado Springs called Psalm 68 Ministries, currently operating out of his home. His website asked for donations to support missionary work, ironically involving children.
Former New Life Church pastor Brady Boyd and his wife have started a new ministry. It's called Psalm 68 Ministries, and it operates out of their home in Colorado Springs. Boyd stepped down from his position at New Life Church in Colorado Springs last month after church elders asked him to resign. In making the announcement, the elders said they did not believe Boyd when he said he did not know a former pastor he worked with sexually abused a child.
The empire Robert built still stands, even if he no longer leads it. For years, he sold himself as God's favorite CEO. Now, the truth behind the branding is public for the world to see. Fame, power, and money mattered far more to him than righteousness ever did. This has been the scandalous rise and fall of Pastor Robert Morris and Gateway Church. If this story mattered to you, hit like, leave a comment, share this video, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Your support helps keep these stories in the light. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.